So good afternoon. I'm Richard Adler from the Institute for the Future, and I'm going to be telling a little story, share a story about caregiving. So I am from Institute for the Future, and what I'm going to be talking about are, Lori Orloff just described caregiving as a looming crisis. And in the work that I'm going to talk about, we started from the assumption that there is a crisis looming, and what we were really interested in is what are strategies, what are actions that can be taken to avert that crisis. So that's the framework. But for those of you who are not familiar with it, let me just introduce Institute for the Future. We're an independent nonprofit research group with more than 47 years of forecasting work. We're, I think, the oldest futures organization in the United States. The core of our work is identifying emerging trends and discontinuities that will transform society and marketplaces. And our research work spans a broad range of trends, from health and healthcare to technology, education, the workplace, human identity. We're located in downtown Palo Alto. Clients include major corporations, government agencies, as well as private foundations like the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, which funded the work that I'm going to talk about. Essentially what IFTF does is we describe ourselves as what we're in the business of providing foresight, views of potential futures that can lead to insight, which ultimately leads to action. And then, unless there's some action that results from the work we do, there's really not much part about it. But we believe that thinking about the future is a very powerful tool for expanding options and improving decision makers in the present. So with that as a background, we've done a number of projects in aging and in caregiving, and then about 6 months ago we were asked by Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to do a project that would look at the future of caregiving. And we started out by conducting a comprehensive literature review, and we did a series of interviews with experts to get different perspectives. And what we found from the experts was both some good news and some bad news. So the good news is that the issue of caregiving today has been receiving far more attention than it has in the past. News articles, politicians, it's really become much more visible. And in addition, a number of states have passed laws that support caregiving, kind of something very new. For example, 30 states have passed something called the CARE Act, which requires hospitals, if there is a patient in the hospital, to identify a caregiver and to provide that caregiver with training if they are expected to perform medical tasks when the patient leaves the hospital. And we also have a lot of data about caregiving, but there's also some bad news. Caregiving can be a difficult, stressful job. Most caregivers get little help, little recognition, and no compensation. Much caregiving is in fact invisible, disconnected from the professional healthcare system and provided in isolation. Many caregivers aren't even aware, don't identify as caregivers. They're just doing things for mom or for dad. And as we've already heard, the number of potential caregivers is not increasing fast enough to keep up with the growth in the need. And so what we've heard is that advocates, politicians have begun to talk about caregiving as a crisis that requires action. But the question is, what kind of action is needed? And that really brought us to our scenarios, which we call 3 scenarios for a crisis averted. Each one portrays a different strategy or intervention to address the problems of caregiving. We recognize that no single intervention is going to solve the problem of caregiving. In fact, it isn't a single problem. It's complicated. But we think there are many different approaches, and so we have 3 scenarios. The first one, called Angels on the Floorboards, which we're going to look at in a moment, explores the role of technology, the topic of the last panel. The second scenario, called Neighbors Care, examines social and economic arrangements to support particularly those people needing care who are childless or without family to support them. And the third one, which we call the CARE Act, looks at the implications of integrating informal family caregiving with the formal healthcare system. Now, these altogether, the three scenarios are intended to provoke serious thinking about strategies and actions that can be taken now. So what we're going to do is we're going to just take 2 minutes and we're going to look at one of the scenarios, the one that we call Angels in the Floorboards. It's a story about the future, and we'll take a quick look at it.
I really like my new job as a customer service manager at our local food co-op. The work is demanding but rewarding. Of course, managing my family as well as my job is a challenge. I have 2 active kids who need me to stay on top of their needs and schedules, even when I'm at work. One big help has been Oscar, our family's digital assistant, who keeps tabs on us so we can stay organized and connected. He schedules our medical appointments, pays our bills, even helps plan our meals and family outings. But this year I've learned what my mom meant when she talked about being in the sandwich generation when she raised me and took care of her parents. Since my dad passed away last year, she's been living on her own, and her Parkinson's disease is making it harder for her to take care of herself. I see her as often as I can, but she's over an hour away, so we've been experimenting with new technologies to help fill the gaps. Fortunately, my dad had installed a bunch of smart systems in their home to automate things like security and energy management. Their system even orders groceries to be automatically delivered to the house. When he passed away, we added a new module that keeps track of my mom's health and her activities. At first, the system was buggy and kept sending out false alarms. But after a bunch of tweaking and a lot of frustration, it seems to be more reliable now. There have been other small technologies that have helped, like the stabilizing utensils that help with her tremors, but the most useful gadget has been Cleo, our telepresence robot. Mom was skeptical about having a robot in her house, but she soon discovered that she could use Cleo to visit with friends who lived in other cities. She also likes the fact that she can use it to visit with her grandkids almost every night. The next upgrade will be to add arms to Cleo to help Mom in and out of the bed and bath. All this technology isn't cheap, but it's less expensive than hiring a full-time caregiver or moving Mom into an assisted living facility. We even found a pharmaceutical company that partially covers the cost in exchange for access to her health data. I really appreciated the value of having all this stuff at 6 o'clock this morning. I got an alert from my mom's medical monitor that she seemed to be having a bad reaction to one of her new meds. I checked on her using Cleo, and she seemed very groggy, so I asked Oscar to send a message right away to her healthcare team. In a few minutes, we were able to set up a 3-way call, and her care team coordinator did a quick assessment and changed the dosage for the drug. After work, I'll go over to the house to check on her in person, but I was relieved that I didn't have to barrel down there in my pajamas first thing in the morning. By the time I got to Mom's house, she seemed to be better, but I discovered a new problem. She's kept an active life online, and even though I've warned her about online scams, she was worried about an urgent message that her home monitoring system was vulnerable to attack, which she needed to pay $1,000 to upgrade. With Oscar's help, I was able to report the scammer and update the security settings to prevent it happening again. Now I just need to figure out why the thermostat in Mom's house insists on keeping the temperature at 90 degrees. You know, sometimes it seems like managing the technology is a whole new set of caregiving responsibilities. I do worry about my in-laws in the country who are getting older and don't have access to all of this tech, but hopefully I won't have to deal with their needs for a few more years.
So there's just a couple of points to make about that. First of all, it's our belief that some of the most useful technologies for caregiving won't necessarily be developed specifically to support caregiving, but will be adapted from other purposes, like a smart home system or an intelligent assistant. Secondly, we also recognize that for every problem that gets solved, there's likely to be new problems, and managing technology is rarely seamless. And finally, something that I've really learned since we completed these scenarios, even though this is supposedly a scenario for 2031, some of these technologies are arriving today. So this is not really necessarily quite as far off in the future as we think. So that's one of the 3 scenarios. Our hope is that organizations and individuals interested in the challenge of caregiving are going to use these scenarios that will be online to help them explore the issues and identify specific actions that can be taken to address the issues of caregiving. And to help them out, we've created a toolkit. It's about a 20-page document that includes questions and some structured exercises to guide the exploration of these issues. And a list of resources. So as I say, this is a grant-funded project, and all of this stuff is going to be available. And the place where you'll be able to find it is they'll all live on the Institute for the Future website. That's the URL. And for those of you who are interested, there's a one-page handout that's on the table where the bookstore is right out in the lobby that has a little bit of a description of the project and the scenarios and has this URL on it. So thank you very much.